name's Greg Loughlin. I live in Atlanta, Georgia. I volunteered and then worked with Men Stopping Violence for about 20 years, and now I'm a writer and teacher. Hi, Melissa.
Hi, Greg. Thanks for joining me. What I'd like to have you talk a little bit about is we've been talking about the influence of community and social learning about gender-based violence. And in particular, I've noticed that you're thinking about spending more time talking about strangulation in particular. So if you could sort of bring these two discussions together a little bit for us, strangulation and thinking about the social or community influences of gender-based violence.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Melissa. So 50 states have passed laws that make strangulation, commonly known as choking, but strangulation a felony. And yet, we're seeing, particularly on college campuses, particularly among young people, research that indicates that strangling one's partner, often during a sexual kind of encounter, is becoming more and more mainstream and more prevalent. And so, how does that happen? We have a criminal legal system saying one thing, and yet there are social norms and messages that are, in some ways, giving men permission to strangle their partners, usually women. And so I've been doing a lot of thinking along with some others around how does that happen? Where are men learning this tactic? And so I wanted to share a few thoughts around that with you. Um, and by the way, this is very gendered. The strangulation, it's most often men strangling women and communities of color and LGBTQ plus communities are more likely to be strangled than men. So this is very gendered and kind of power based. So men are learning this behavior through lots of kind of social learning and social channels, one of which is mainstream pornography. There's research out there that shows how much kind of strangulation slash choking is in pornography. And men that experience that, men that consume pornography with that behavior in it, there's a correlation with men acting that out in real life, like thinking, okay, everybody's doing this. Maybe this is expected. There are no consequences. And so I'm going to try it too. And so there's a real kind of connection there. We talked earlier back in my day when I first came to Men Stopping Violence. I went through the internship, and all men were required to bring our pornography into Men Stopping Violence to destroy it.
Oh, wow.
And at that time, think about it, it was all paper
Right,
or
right,
VCRs, and it could be destroyed. Um,
right.
Now it really can't. I mean, it's on people's phones. And when I'm talking about pornography here, I'm talking about mainstream kind of heteronormative pornography that most kind of heterosexual men would choose to watch if they were to watch some. And so strangulation is prevalent there. There's also other influences of mixed martial arts, jujitsu, those kind of
Oh,
trainings where men are being trained to strangle. That's usually with other men, but there's kind of a glorification of that. I don't know if you saw, but President Trump has announced that there's going to be a mixed martial arts fight on the White House grounds.
oh, I didn't. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I
I
think
didn't know that.
In June of next year is when it's planned. There's a 50% likelihood that that fight will end in somebody being strangled to unconsciousness or to submission. Um, Men in the military, chokeholds, strangulation are part of the basic kind of combat training
Yeah.
for all folks in the military. And then the media kind of glorification of military and law enforcement kind of tactics. there was a Jack Harlow song recently. It was a popular song where I forgot the exact lyrics, but he said, "I'm vanilla, baby. I'll choke you, but I won't kill you." Um, there's a prevalence of something called the choking game, which is actually something that's done individually, and yet that whole language of the choking game, chokes in mixed martial arts are called sportive chokes. These are sportive. And so all of these are ways that strangulation is being kind of normalized and minimized. And what we know about in a patriarchal society is that men may practice these things with other men, but what we see is that women and communities of color and LGBTQ plus kind of communities are the ones that are bearing the brunt of this kind of tactic. And so, um,
Yeah, and Greg, I mean, I think this
yeah,
is a really important point that you're making in the regards of why we so often see why some groups of people, right, are subject more to these sort of acts of violence more than others, right? And I think this is a really interesting example here that you're giving that about how the power over in the community, right, plays out in terms of between individuals.
yeah. I do think there's sometimes even an expectation of masculine, like this is a marker of masculinity, that I know how to do this, that this is one way I can kind of prove, my masculinity, to know how to do what these mixed martial arts fighters do. There's also in each of these, both pornography, but also mixed martial arts, a real dampening of empathy and a real kind of socialization to kind of try to even get rid of empathy. Like somebody in a pornography video, a woman is a sexual object, kind of not a person. To end a mixed martial arts match, sometimes you'll see somebody being beaten even while they're unconscious. And so, I think these are ways that men are both learning tactics, but also learning um, to dampen or to do away with their empathy or bury it very deeply. And so it's a dangerous combination. Um, I think men forget that these have effects.
Yeah,
The strangulation and choking are horrific, and they have long-term effects, including strokes, post-traumatic stress disorder, and even death. This is not a game,
right.
and um, I think men need to know that and reconnect with those effects and reconnect with that empathy.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Gray, for talking about this because one of the things also you're sort of reminding me of too is the power that algorithms have, right, on all of us, right? But I think this is a really good example of that in terms of sort of how things become normalized because you keep seeing it, right? In
Yeah,
a photo and a meme and a video over and over and over, and how that sort of gives our self-talk in our head or our belief systems the permission, like, well, everybody does it, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's a really good example of that, Greg.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks, Greg. This has been so interesting. I learned a whole bunch just from you here today about this and appreciate your time.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks.